Hey everybody, welcome to Pianist Academy. I'm Szczepanek. Welcome to another live stream. Today is a full Q&A session. We don't have any submissions for masterclasses. So wonderful. I'm looking forward to seeing where the day takes us. Good morning, Jess. And is it Calais? Calais? Did I say that right, Calais? Good morning. Alexis, good evening. Rob, hello Rob. Hello OCD King. Hello David and Nelba. Rhodesy, hello. Antonio, always good to see you. Nancy, Sinden, wonderful. Awesome, I got your name right. I'm so glad. Oh, great. Well, welcome everyone. Why don't we actually start today off by, we did this a couple weeks ago, but maybe things have changed, and there are also some new people here. What are you currently working on? What rep, what pieces, what technique? Any of those things. What are you currently working on? And what's causing you the most trouble in your practice? We can start with that. So yeah, drop a couple things in the chat. And like I mentioned at the beginning of today, we don't have any master classes. We don't have any video submissions. So if that ties into a question that you have, feel free, drop that in the chat and we can get started right away with some questions and answers for all of you. Calais. Okay, you say you're working on I Can Imagine accompaniment part. You train classically and you want to switch to chords. So chord type playing for accompaniment. Okay, great. Calais, is that a question that you have today? We can dive into that right away, if it is. Rhodesy said you're working on Chopin's 13th Prelude. Accenting the melody is hard. Okay. And hello, Bethany. Awesome, awesome. And hello, Ella. So let's see. We have Alexis is composing for music lessons, and you're lost. Okay, we can definitely talk about that, Alexis. OCD King's working on some Tchaikovsky, Morning Prayer. Wonderful little piece there. Beautiful piece. Nelba is working on Chopin's Waltz in B minor. Very nice. Oh, David, the Handel Passacaglia. Okay. All right. Bethany, you're still working on that. Was that for a choral concert, Bethany? I think I remember that right. And Sinden, your trill and Bach is getting better, and you're doing contrary scales for better finger coordination. Okay. Okay, good. Hey, Alan. Welcome back, Alan. Okay, great. Wonderful stuff, everybody. Why don't we dive in with, let's see, since Calais was the first to ask about this, let's talk a little bit about that. So you're working on I Can Imagine by Mercy Me. And you want to, so you're trained classically and you want to be able to play from chords like lead sheets better, right? Let me pull up some blank paper and let's talk about that. Okay. Okay, here we go. Yeah, so you said chords and accompaniment. Great. I don't know what key what key that song is in. We're just going to kind of run with, well, let's put it in a typical guitar key of E major. So let's say we're working in E. And we're going to have a bunch of chord changes in E. So we're probably going to have things like the 1 chord, E, and we're going to have an A. That'll be huge in pop music, E, A, B, and maybe an F sharp minor. Let's just work with those 4 chords for a second. So let's say we're playing a lead sheet, and we see these changes in front of us. What can we do to help memorize what these chords are and figure them out a little bit more quickly? Something that I'd actually start with, especially if you're classically trained, is do you have, can you think of some other pieces of music that you've played that are in the key that you're working on? Even though they're totally separate genres, even though they're maybe sound we think nothing alike, right? Do you have any other repertoire that you've studied heavily, that maybe you've memorized even, that are in the keys of this piece that you're working on, or any of the other pieces that you'd like to play off a lead sheet? Start there, and can you go through and do a little bit of analysis on the sheet music? And can we say, even if it's not Roman numeral analysis, just can we write in the chord names? Can we write in if it's E major, A major, B major, etc., if it's in the key of E, whatever key it happens to be? Start there, and then let's start tying together when we play those chords in this piece that we're really familiar with. What does it feel like? What does it feel like, let's say, if we're playing, I'm going to change keys for a second here, but let's say Liszt's Un Sospiro is in D flat. And it begins with arpeggiated D flat chords. Seems like there's a lot of notes there, but it's actually quite simple. It's just D flat that we arpeggiate. When we add the melody, it gets a little bit more complicated, yes, but really all the accompaniment is doing is playing D flat, G flat, D flat. This is G flat in second inversion. So there's an example that is usually considered like a really advanced piece of repertoire, but the beginning of it is incredibly simple to understand. It's just two chords. And in fact, they're two chords that would be used a ton in pop music and more contemporary genres. In fact, we could even say, we could change the style. Let's keep the melody the same. This is like blasphemy for Liszt, But there we go. We just recomposed Liszt in a slightly different style because we knew those two chords. Okay, so if you've got, so Kale, I see that it's only the only worship music that you've done, but take that key that it's in and what other classical rep that have you studied, and let's tie together what it feels like to play that classical rep, the chords, and any other movement, whether we have runs or scales or arpeggiated stuff. How does it tie together? And first, can we apply it that way? Secondly, let's go back to the sheet here. So we have 4 chord changes that we say we're working on. If we're in the key of E major, or whatever key it is that this song is in, do you know for sure your cadence pattern in E? Can we play 1-4-1-5-1? Right? The beautiful thing is that for pop music, E is the 1 chord, A is the 4 chord, we go back through E, and B is the 5 chord. So in classical rep, we think about it with Roman numerals. In pop music, we'd get these letter names written down. The only one that we'd then be missing is F sharp, which would be the 2 chord. So if you know your cadence pattern, which I try to work with everybody, all of my students on this, we automatically know 3 of the most important chords for working in pop music, really. Pop music, worship music, anything more contemporary. Then, do you know those? Let me switch views for you. So here are those chord changes again. E, A, E, B. And this would be, there are resources all over online to find that, right? But instead of just thinking about it as a cadence pattern, let's remember E, A, E, B, E. Do them in all of their inversions. E, A, E, B, E. Next inversion, E, A, E, B, B7, E. So can we play those patterns in every inversion? And then can we start to tie together? If we play an octave, let's say in the left hand, or an octave in a fifth. So that's just E, B, E. Can I go through and with my right hand, can I play any inversion of E major? We can just block the chord, go to another inversion. Okay, what about going through the inversions? We can do those still blocked. Okay. What about arpeggiating the right hand. We're still just playing through an E major chord. We're thinking about it in a variety of ways, right? Let's switch it. Can we play a blocked chord in the right hand for E major? Maybe let's take the tempo in 3 this time. Or 6. Can we arpeggiate the left hand over that chord? Change the inversion in the right hand. These are great exercises for getting to know our chords to begin with, right? Then can we do the same thing for the other chords we're working on? A, B, F sharp. And then, can you start to link these together? Can we, let's come up with a change, a sequence. So we start in E, and then we play to A. That sounds like worship music. E, A. How about F sharp minor? Back to A. Back to E. Rhodesy, I don't know who that is. And we can keep things fairly simple, and we can actually write kind of a great piano part. All I did there was play the octave for the root of whatever chord I was playing. So if it was E, I was playing E's in octaves. If it was A, I was playing an A in octaves. When it was F sharp, just F sharp in octaves. Yeah, the harder part is learning how to navigate in closest position between E and A and F sharp, where the hand doesn't have to move back to root position, you know, for E, A, F sharp, etc. And the 2 ways that I think are really best for learning that stuff is that first thing I suggested, which is going back to your classical rep that you know really well, see how the great composers have taken your hands through different chord progressions. There's so much you can learn from that. Other than just memorizing the notes, be really aware of where you are, what harmony you're playing when you're playing it, right? And secondly, all of your cadence patterns. And can you come up with your own exercise to go through? Can you write your own changes? Can you take the changes from the song you're working on? Is it called Can I Imagine? I can only imagine. So take those, maybe take the changes that are in a verse and write some of your own exercises around that. So can we go through the probably 4 chords? Can we play them in different inversions? Can we play them in closest position? And that will help tie together a lot of, hopefully, things that you probably already know, right? If you've already taken classical lessons, that's why we're trying to tie that with classical music. And have the hands, give the hands something relatable for all of the letters that you'll see on a lead sheet or something like that. So I hope that helps. Let us know how it goes. So yeah, you just said sonatina in C. Awesome. Was that is that this one? There are different grades depending on. Yeah. On the internet, oh, hello, by the way, internet. You found that when transposing, that different voicings work better. 100%. That's something that I got, people argued with me about on one of my videos from a couple months ago, that I said, like, things do not feel the same or work the same from key to key. And there was a lot of confused responses about that. But absolutely right. You can't always just take the same voicing or the same chords or the same progression, especially if you have an opportunity where we're not transposing like a classical piece. But if it's something else that we can rearrange and work on, we can make some better choices if we do a little bit of rearranging. Okay, I'm jumping back up to the top. Thanks, everybody, for all of the comments. I'm going to have to go through these one by one. Rhodesy, I wanted to touch on this because you said you were working on Chopin's 13th Prelude, but accenting the melody is hard. And so you're thinking of switching pieces. Don't switch pieces. Stick with what you're working on, and let's try to perfect at least a little bit. Let's get better at the aspect that's so hard. And one of the things that I would love to see you do, Rhodesy, is I've talked with some of my students about this lately. Play, everything comes back to scales, Rhodesy. Play a scale, and let's say we need to bring out the right hand. Play the right hand detached and forte. Let's take a nice sounding scale. How about B major? Detached and forte, while the left hand plays piano and legato. So we're working on the separation of what the two hands are doing, and we're doing it with something that we, Rhodesy, hopefully would know really well, like a scale, where we don't have to think about the notes or the fingers. Flip the hands. So detached and forte in the left, piano and legato in the right. Yes, that would be a great thing to practice. And if you need to, then beyond that, if we need to practice voicing a chord or something like that, I've talked about this before in other streams, Rhodesy, but there are exercises to break the chord, right? So we play the note we want to bring out first, and then the rest of the chord. I think you've been around for those in the past, so I'm not going to go into that again. But that should help. So Rhodesy, you said it's finger strength. If you know me, Rhodesy, you know that I would say there's no such thing as finger strength. Yes, it's all about alignment and efficiently using the fingers. So if we need to play out with 4 or 5, then we probably need to align the wrist and the hand behind 4 and 5 better. Yeah? And if we can't do that, it's still not a matter of finger strength. It's a matter of probably rotating into the fingers that we need to use. So if we want to, for example, accent the 4th finger like this on the top of a chord, that's just B major, as opposed to accenting the thumb. Same 3 notes. Thumb is accented, 4th finger is accented. Big difference in tone, right? If we want to do that, it's a matter of rotating the hand toward the finger we need to play, that we need to bring out of the texture more. When we want to bring out 4 and 5, we're going to rotate a little bit toward 4 and 5, especially on the attack. So when we play, let's say from neutral, there might be a preparation, and then when the hand plays, do you see what I'm doing there? I'm rotating toward 4. The thumb comes away slightly. I'm not attacking with the 4th finger any more so than if I tried to play everything evenly. Yeah? And Internet, that's a good observation. You said your view is individual notes need to be weighted differently in different chords. And yes, I haven't told this story in a while. I might not tell it now, but if we get through enough questions, I will. But there is also not just one way to voice chords. Even in classical repertoire, there's not just one way to voice them. There are so many ways. It's a lot to think about. Okay. Let me try to go back and find the next question. So, Alexis, I had seen what you wrote. This was about composing. You said you've been trying to compose for music lessons and you're lost. You know how you want it to sound, but you don't know how to translate the sounds and melodies from your mind onto the piano. I don't think, I'm looking to see if you said anything else in the meantime. I don't think you have. So Alexis, without being able to work with you one-on-one, the biggest thing I would say is, can you make a recording on a simple device like a phone, a voice memo? Can you record yourself singing the melody line? Can we give ourselves a record of what's here, and have it disconnected from what we try to do when we start playing. Yes? As soon as we start playing, there's a lot of other things that come into play, like thinking about what our hands and fingers are doing, and also what they're used to doing. The more that, and I wonder if Bethany is still here, tell us if you find that this happens to you, because we've seen and listened to a number of Bethany's compositions. The hands, when we improvise or when we just sit down to play, they're going to tend to do what we've practiced most. And so whatever that happens to be is going to tend to be how your compositions turn out. The trouble is, if you tend to play like chords, or if you tend to play, let's say, in C major, and we're trying to write something in A, as soon as we translate that to what the hands are doing, we're going to confuse our mind, because we're not yet fluent enough in how to make all of it translate and remember the idea that we had. So the first thing is the idea that you have, and it's in your mind, and you know it's there. Can we get it down somewhere else? Like sing it into a voice memo, and then be able to reference that. And in that case, it turns into the compositional part is when we record that quickly, and then it turns into kind of a transcribing exercise, an ear training exercise, which isn't a bad thing, because the faster we can do that transcription and the faster we can find out what it was that we sang, then the faster that's going to happen when we're in the moment, when we have an idea. Let's see. If I'm in D. Okay. Let's do a little, I'm going to give myself a test. So what I'm asking you to do is, let's say we have an idea, and it goes like, ba-da-dum, ba-da-dum. That much. Da-da-dum, ba-da-dum, da-da-da. 6 pitches with a little bit of rhythm. So now, because I'm not going to record it, let's say I recorded it, I'm singing it back to myself. Ba-da-dum, ba-da-dum. What pitches are those? It starts on F sharp. Da-dum. It's up a 7th. The better your ear training gets, the faster you'll be able to do this. But you can, once you have that recording, you can poke around on the keyboard until you find it. And every time you find something, your ear training is going to get a little bit better and a little bit better. So my melody was ba-da-dum, ba-da-da-dum. See, I messed up by a step there. Okay, and then if I were to harmonize that, or it could be, there we go. A couple different ways. So take it step by step. Make a recording, transcribe it. Whether we write it down or not that could be simply to help you remember if you need to. Then we do it, we treat it like a transcribing exercise. We learn how to play it, what we just sang in, and then we can learn kind of the tools of composition. How did I know how to harmonize it? I know common tones between the melody that I played and what harmonies they can be found in. And we started with some of the simplest ones, just those two. And then we made it more complex. How about using the notes as upper extensions? That is now, it's no longer a chord tone, but it's the 11th of B minor. So more complicated. And then also the 11th of E minor. Alexis, I hope that helps. I hope that helps, Alexis. Let's see. Going back. June, I see your question. June E., you said, is there a trick to approaching pieces with many flats or sharps because you're afraid of black keys? The first thing would be, I would learn your scales for those keys and learn your arpeggios. There is nothing, and then take what I'm about to say for a boost of confidence. There is nothing inherently more difficult about playing in D major with 2 sharps and in G flat major with 6 flats. Think about it this way. Each key is kind of like, when you first learned scales, they feel a little bit different, and every single one of them is kind of a challenge or a little bit of a mountain to climb. And then we start to learn that, for example, most of our white key major scales follow the same finger pattern. And where the thumb crosses under 3 and 4 and vice versa, well, we see that they happen in the same places. And all of a sudden, when we put that together, we learn that playing in D and G and E and A, those all feel, they have a similar feeling, right? They're slightly different, but there's that similarity. When we move to G flat, for example, well, all of a sudden that scale fingering is completely different than what we're accustomed to. And usually at this point, by the time you start playing with key signatures with, let's say, further around the circle of fifths, more sharps and flats, you have had a lot of time to become accustomed to the keys at the top of the circle. C, D, F, B flat, etc., right? And we haven't had that challenge of learning a new key in a long time. But really, learning G flat is no more difficult than any other key. Same thing, all of the keys, I would say, none of them are any more difficult. They're just different. And so have patience with yourself and try to remember what it was like when you started learning your first scales and your first arpeggios and your first cadence patterns, linking this all together. And try to give yourself that same amount of time that it took you that first time around. And that's quite okay. Also, the more you just dive in and you do it, the easier it's going to get. So just dive in and do it. Yeah. Internet just said C is the hardest key to play in, and I usually agree with that. Yeah, C is the hardest key because we don't have any other landmarks. We do get to keep the hand kind of in one position toward the outside of the keys, but there are no other landmarks. So June. Oh, and then I see you said my contemplation, my second contemplation. Let's look at that. Right, I haven't played this in a long time. So June, what key is this piece in? Anybody could answer that. What key are we in? Rotzi, I'm looking at you. Oh, it's a good guess, Rotzi. Look a little closer, though. You're right. It's got 5 sharps. Look at the first chord, though. This. That doesn't sound major. So what's yeah, Steven says G sharp. It's G sharp minor. G sharp minor is the relative of B major. So we talk about B major. I've talked about this. Rotzi, I appreciate that. I'll take that as a compliment. I've talked about how B major is one of the easiest keys to play in. You could also argue that D flat is also one of the easiest keys to play in. G sharp minor, while it is a relative of B major, is a bit confusing. It's a bit confusing to play. There's a lot of transition in and out of the keyboard just to play the scale and work our way around. So it's not quite, let's say, as easy as B major. But it really, gosh, I say that, but then as I think about it, it really is. It really is just becoming comfortable with being in that key. It's still just 7 notes. The scale is just 7 notes for the harmonic version. Same as B, same as any other key. It's only 7 pitches. We just need to learn what they are. The trouble with any minor key is that we're also going to get some added accidentals because of needing the leading tone present. But June, here's one more tip for you. And I see that you said you play lever harp. Yes. So I see that. One other tip for you is, when you can, look ahead and try to figure out, like, what is this entire, let me put it in red, this entire measure. Can you play it with both hands, and can we block it together? And how would you define it? And then, does it repeat? Yes, and it repeats. And even this repeats again, just with a different rhythm. Oh, and then we get something else. So, look for those commonalities. Yeah. Calais says, don't like the accidentals. E sharp. Yeah. I know. Oh my gosh. You guys are funny. Oh, Rotsi, I would disagree. You definitely can sing grace notes when they're slow enough. For sure you can. Oh, June, I hope that helps. The biggest takeaway is don't be afraid. Don't be afraid of the other keys. And feel free to experiment. Just experiment with them. Even if you're not playing something in a key, just play around with the chords, play around with the scale. Yeah. Okay, let's jump back. Let's see, I think... where are we? Let's see, Internet Pride. I think our next question is from Seth. Seth said, do you have any advice for what to do if you can't trust your counting? For example, when counting 1 E and for 16th notes, they will speed up or slow down to fit how the brain thinks the music should go. Yeah. Try a variation on 2 things. So first off, Seth, can you record yourself counting a steady beat? Record yourself counting, if you're working on a passage in 16ths, 1 E and 2 E and etc. And make sure it's precise. So then it's your voice, the same voice that you hear when you're counting out loud to yourself while you practice. It's not the click of a metronome, but we're still keeping it steady and we can focus on it. Play the recording back and try to play through as if you're using it kind of like a quasi-metronome, right? Can we line things up that way? The second piece would be take always the, let me read your question one more time. Okay. If you have rhythms that change between 16ths and 8ths and quarters, for example, count everything with the fastest subdivision and try not to change the subdivision. So if 16ths are our fastest notes, 1 E and a 2 E and a, even when we have quarter notes, just count all 4 subdivisions for the quarter note. So we're trying to train ourselves to, one, yes, we want to feel that the quarter note is longer, but changing the subdivisions of a beat is pretty tricky if we don't already have a really good inner sense of pulse. Here's another test you can do. Can you count out loud? Can you count, let's say, 4 measures? And can we maintain, just while we're counting, can we maintain the pulse? Can we do that? Can you count and just tap the same pulse? So if it's 1E and 2E and... so what we're doing is eliminating the notes from the equation and some of the finger movement. Can we count our subdivisions and can we tap the rhythm that we need to play? So if it's 1E and 2E and, for example, that was dotted 8th, 16th, 8th, 16th, 16th. But we're still counting all of the fastest subdivisions, the 16th subdivisions. I think those would be my biggest suggestions for you, Seth. Seth, remind me, are you working with a teacher? Because one of the other things that I do with my own students is that I will record the. So yes, ask your teacher to do 2 things. Ask your teacher to record the piece in the correct rhythm for you, or just like when you're at your lesson, grab your phone and make a quick recording of it. So even if it's just 2 measures or 4 measures, we have that snippet at the practice tempo we need, played in exactly the right rhythm. Then you can count to the recording, right? Which is going to be a lot more like what you're doing in your own practice than, let's say, if it's a piece and you can go find it online somewhere played by a professional or someone else, it's always going to be at performance tempo. You're almost never going to find practice tempo. And so that's difficult to draw that correlation, right? So if your teacher can make that recording, you can practice counting along to it, and we're building that ear connection between that music that we hear, understanding the tempo that it should be, the rhythm that it should be, and linking it to our own counting. Yes? And then secondarily, as kind of a double check, can your teacher play the same passage and can they count out loud? Better if you can count out loud while they do it, but we want to make sure that your recording that you're going to practice with is perfect. So if it can be your voice, I think that's the best. And if we're afraid that it's not going to be good enough to practice with, then ask your teacher to do that too. Yeah. All right. Okay, we're working through. I see Bedlington Groomer. I see you that you tuned in, but you might have had to leave. Oh, Nancy said you didn't know that there was more. Oh, to that Clementi sonatina that we were talking about earlier. Clementi wrote a whole bunch of stuff. But yeah, I think typically we only ever hear Opus 36 number 1. But there are many more. There are 6 sonatinas just in that opus. So Cloudman 10. Welcome, Cloudman. I hope you're still here. I know this. You wrote this a little bit ago. As you said, you're currently an adult classical guitar player at 65, but you started with piano at 27 years old. So you love listening and learning. Oh, well, thanks. I thought you had a question, Cloudman. Oh, great. If you do have a question, Cloudman, let me know, but I appreciate your comment. Oh, Rhodesy, I just saw this, where you said you won't see a boxer punching lightly in order to win the fight. Remember that playing the piano is not about being strong. It is not about... Basically, we're using nature to play the piano. We use gravity, we use weight, we use there isn't a lot of force that we need to generate. And I've said this before. A 4-year-old child has enough strength to play the piano extraordinarily well. Will you see a 4-year-old child win a boxing match? No. Will it even look like boxing if there are 2 4-year-olds trying to punch each other? Probably not. But that's my point. It does not take, we're not putting force into the keys. And if we do have that perception of that's how we play with more dynamic, we're going to have a really tense playing mechanism, and our tone is going to be really harsh. So we don't want that. We want to do it more efficiently with really just dropping. I do that. You can try this, Road C, as well. But if you just, this is going to be a little painful, but if you just have your hands and leave them above the keys, and here's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to drop my arms like that. And let gravity take them. I'm not pushing them down. I'm just letting gravity take them. This is what we get. Were you ready for that? That is fortissimo at least. And it took no muscle activation. None. All it was gravity. So I hope, Rhodesy, that nasty sound will convince you. Okay, let's see. Where were we? Dith. Hello, Dith. Dith, you ask, any idea why RCM has you learn the harmonic and melodic scales, but not the natural ones? Seems like a strange thing to leave out. At least that's what they've done for level 4 and 5. Yeah. So simplest answer, Dith, is that the natural minor is exactly the same as its major counterpart. So if we just use C major and A minor for an example, C major is all white keys, A minor is all white keys. Yes, our starting fingers change, but the position that we have to navigate the hands through is basically no different. They feel incredibly similar. But as soon as we add the harmonic minor, G sharp, that adds a change to that scale. As soon as we play melodic minor, that's also a change, right? So that's the biggest reason, is that by the time you've learned all of your major scales, you're going to know all of those patterns of pitches, pretty much. It's just about guaranteed that you're going to know all of those. We don't have to go through all of them again to play natural minor. And in fact, a natural minor is in classical music is relatively little. It's relatively little used. It's not used very often because natural minor doesn't have the leading tone. You're not going to hear very much classical music that disobeys dominant tonic harmonic function. You're always going to have, right? Here's the leading tone. The leading tone is only present in harmonic minor. And since RCM focuses solely on the classical repertoire, that also plays into that. Okay. Okay. Kale, I see your comment. Flats make you sharp. I love that. Let's see. Road C, you said, try this melody. It's the best one I've made yet. E flat, D, C, B flat twice. Well, let's go one note at a time. Okay. So E flat, D. Maybe down. Return on original E flat. Oh, I probably did that wrong then. So maybe something like that. Cool, Road C. Yeah, okay. There were some interesting places that could go, Rotsi. It's nice. I would be wondering how you harmonized it and what rhythms you took. Yeah. Yes, Rotsi. You say you play fast, random notes to impress people at train stations. That's funny. But I'm glad you're out playing, Rotsi. That's great. Let's see, this is a comment about keys and key signatures. Dith said, one reason that you find that flat keys seem harder is that everyone assumes they're harder, so no one writes beginner music for them. That's totally true. Part of the struggle is that, and part of the reason why method books and, let's say, a lot of beginner music is written in C is because the notation is, let's face it, it is easier to read in C. We don't have as much to deal with. We don't have to deal with accidentals. So in that sense, it's easier. But music isn't about reading off the page, right? And so what I like to do if I have an opportunity with a student that's really at the beginning of their journey, is we'll start composing our own stuff in all the other keys. Really early, like in the first month. So we might be working on reading notation in C, and they might have an assignment to write a piece of music in D flat. And it's not going to be like, it's not going to be Chopin or anything like that. But it gets us thinking about, well, what sounds good and how do we play in the other keys? And now we're using all of the keyboard. We're using all of the notes. We don't have to read it on paper. So we're working on ear training. We're working on playing things in a different place with the hands. It's great stuff. But that is really part of the reason why there isn't that music written. Yeah. There should be, though. There should be. Some of the flat keys and sharp keys, they're not that hard to read. They really aren't. See, Rotsi, you said G flat is the easiest key to play in. That might depend on what the piece does compositionally, but sure, I'll go with you. Yeah. Oh, Internet Privacy said you should give the sheet music away, and I think you mean to the contemplation. I have a comment about that. In fact, and how a lot of people have that piece is if you sign up for my email list, you get a free copy of Contemplation number 2. Let me put it back on the screen. I don't even know if there's a link to do that below this video, but there are links all over the place. I don't bother you that often. I actually haven't written an email to my list in about 2 months. I'm due. But if you'd like a copy of this piece, it is it's 2 pages. 2 pages. I would call this mid-intermediate. You can get that, and you can get a practice planner if you sign up for the email list. So yes, it is available if you'd like a copy, and it's free. It's completely free. Okay, I think Rhodesy, I see you probably have the next question here. What to do when you're sight reading and you get a wrong note, but you don't know it's wrong, and you learn it wrongly accidentally? Rhodesy, the first thing I'd say is, if you're learning pieces by, let's say, other composers, and they're pieces that have been recorded, one of the first things you should get used to doing is listening to a recording of the piece. And that should be part of your preparation to practice, maybe even before day 1 of practicing. You should be listening to someone else play it and perform it, probably more than just one person. And if we're really paying enough attention and we know the music well enough after listening, that's going to help us catch those wrong notes that we're reading accidentally in our sight reading. that's really the best way to approach this, to prohibit or prevent the wrong notes from occurring in the first place, is we have to have enough ear training to know, well, this isn't the piece, this isn't what the composer wrote if we miss the cue on the page. This only secondary thing would be understanding enough theory to know why a composer might write something instead of something else. But that doesn't even necessarily prevent us from making the mistake in the first place, because there can be a lot of seemingly correct things to play when we're sight reading. There can be a lot of stuff that sounds fine when we sight read, and it might be a half step off, one pitch, and it still sounds fine, and it might still function correctly harmonically. So that doesn't prevent everything, but it can definitely help. For example, like what I talked about with the minor keys and the difference between natural minor and harmonic minor, and why we never really learn natural minor. If a classical composer writes the 5 chord without the leading tone, or if you read it that way, it's highly unlikely that that's what was actually written. So there's one rule that like 99.9% of the time would not be broken. And if you accidentally read, because our ears are used to hearing things, well, we can hear, for example, E minor with A minor, and it sounds fine, because we've experienced so much more music than some of the great composers had 200 years ago. The tonal language, harmonic language of music is so much more diversified than it used to be. So this doesn't raise a flag for us. But it should. For example, if you're playing Chopin, Beethoven, it should be. Right? Yeah. So that's the big thing, Rotsi, is make sure we listen ahead of time. If that's ever a possibility, make sure we listen to a bunch of recordings. And actually make that part of your daily practice, especially while the only time we really stop listening to recordings, I would say, is when you become a professional and you want to record a piece and you want to put your own stamp on it. You want it to be your interpretation. We don't want to be as affected by what we've already listened to. And there comes a point, years and years and years and years down the road, where we stop listening to recordings, or we don't listen to the recordings of pieces that we're working on to record or perform. We don't do that. We'll listen to other music. But we don't want to be influenced by what we hear from others. But that's a totally different concept. And in the meantime, Rotsi, for the next 20 years or more, listen. And that's going to be your Apple Music or iTunes or whatever you use is going to be your best friend. All right. Oh, Edith, I see your comment. Seems obvious now. That's okay. Okay, cool. Tell me if I've missed any questions. I don't mean to. I'm just trying to find the next one. Kale, I'll hit this one quickly. You said, why do some piano teachers think that kids can't play yet, even at age 6? There's kind of an interesting thing, a phenomenon happening in piano teaching right now, and maybe this is what you're referring to, but there's a push kind of away from teaching really young kids at the keyboard, and instead trying to teach them movement and rhythm and pitch, really all kinds of ear training skills, trying to teach that first before we get so preoccupied with reading notation off a page. And the idea is that when we just are reading off a page, we get locked into that, and then years go by and we're never challenged in another way. This can even apply to all of the adult students here too. If we never get challenged in another way and we never think about music as not just being the notes on the page that we're playing, but we don't conceptualize it, we don't imagine it, we don't interpret it in different ways, we get locked into being really we'll say like having a stodgy approach to music where there isn't a lot of emotional attachment to it. We don't really know how to tell a story or how to go on a journey with a piece because everything has been focused on just reading the page. And that's the big reason why a lot of teachers are not teaching young kids they're not teaching piano lessons, period. They'll say, go to music class or go to music learning theory? That's very becoming more and more popular. Do something like that where we can explore all of those other aspects of music. We learn how to feel them, which you could argue is even more important. And then later, once that is ingrained, later we introduce sitting at the piano to create music and notation. Personally, I don't think that they need to be separate. Internet privacy says piano lessons are generally a failure. I think that is really case dependent, because I would absolutely not be where I am today without the lessons I took. And I think most of my students would say the same thing. But what you just said, you said so many people have several years of lessons and cannot play a single piece. That's not because piano lessons are bad. It's probably because the teacher wasn't very good. So I wish there were more great teachers out there, I can say that. Oh, Sinden, I see. Sinden, be sure and check your spam folder if you signed up today, if it didn't come in. Otherwise, drop me an email. There's a link to how to find or there might even be my email address in the description below the video. So just send me a personal email, and I will make sure that you get that. Absolutely. Let's see. Alexis, going back. So Alexis, you said, so what do I do with the scale? How do I figure out and transpose this to different scales? How are people able to practice scales for hours? What are they doing in that time? So practicing scales for hours, I would never suggest that. I think that's kind of a waste of time. We don't need to practice scales for that long. We should spend, 10 to 15 minutes a day working on scales. And we can have different goals over that time. Part of this, if you're working on, let's say, Alexis, if you're working on speed and we want to be able to execute things faster and build technique, that can be a goal of those 15 minutes. If we simply want to figure out how to navigate our way around a key better, that can be a goal. All that means is when we're in a particular key, paying attention to the notes we play and seeing the pattern they form on the keyboard. And can we start to memorize while we play a scale? No, this doesn't have to be quick. This is a way that scales, they seemingly never get used this way, and it's one of the most important ways to use them. We don't just have to run. That's fine. But if it's mindless, there's almost no benefit. Instead, can we say, for example, the third pitch in A, I'm playing A major, is C sharp. How is C sharp related to A? Can we figure out all the different ways that it's related to A? Well, it's a part of the 1 chord, and it's a part of the 3 chord in A. 3 would be C sharp minor. Now our scale can cue something else that we do. We can play a scale in the left hand and pick some chords to play along with scale degrees in the right hand. Now we're not just going through the notes to practice for either a technical reason or a lost technical reason if the time spent is not focused, but instead we're saying, here are all of the pitch relationships in this key, and how can I pair this with other information that I know? Can we do the same thing going backwards down the scale? Can you play a chord in the right hand for every scale tone going down the scale with the left? That doesn't necessarily mean that it's the root. For example, first scale degree down is number 7. That's G sharp in A major. But I played E major with it because E major has a common tone. So I'm using the scale as like a walking bass line and harmonizing with it. That wasn't as good as the first time. Pick a couple, like 1 or 2 scales to work on for 15 minutes, maybe 20 minutes, and do stuff like that with it, rather than just running scales. No matter what it is, if we're just running them up and down and up and down and up and down, or Hanon, or any other exercise, if we're just playing notes, whoever it is that's practicing that, a great deal of the time that they're spending doing that has been completely wasted. So it always needs a purpose. And sometimes running a scale quickly has a purpose. Sometimes it's to build speed. Sometimes there's no purpose. And when there is no purpose, we need to stop and reset and figure out, well, what did I just do for the last minute and why did I do it? How can I change the approach for the next 5 to make it more valuable for us? Yes, Diff. It would not be a stream without Hanon catching shrapnel. Yes, Alexis, I hope you heard everything I said. And yeah, I hope you got that. Oh. Cool. Let me go back and look at what Nancy was saying. Nancy was FJH, scale book, 15 minutes per scale doing major and its minor for a half hour. All scales, major, minor, with their sharps and flats. Yeah. That's pretty good. That's pretty good, Nancy. Okay, I think the next question was from Z Spark. Hello, Z Spark. Your question is, how do you start composing when you're new to theory? Do you just think of a chord progression and try to add a melody to it? Z-Spark, I would pick, first of all, pick a style that you want to write in, and let's know that ahead of time. So if it's going to be contemporary, like easy listening piano, that's a style. If it's going to be classical, like Mozartian, that could be a style. I wouldn't do anything more complicated than early classical style for classical composition because it's going to get, theoretically, it's going to get too complex too quickly. Gosh, what else? If it's going to be like a praise song that we worked on right at the beginning of the stream, that's a style. If it's going to be, maybe let's leave it there. And we'll group praise and pop together. So there are a couple different things you can do. You can start by just saying, I'm going to try playing some notes. Let's work in C major. Because if we don't have any theory, most of the pitches, most of the white keys are going to sound good. So if we're in C, let's say, and we're just going to pick some random notes. I'm not even going to try to sing this ahead of time to myself. I'm not going to try to make it beautiful. I'm literally just going to pick random pitches. Okay. So what was that? G, B, C. That almost doesn't sound like it's in C, but it will when we harmonize it probably. So I'm just trying to remember that now. If you were doing this, you could write down E, B, C, G, A, F. Okay. Now, I'm going to pick some chords to go with those. Let's just try one chord per melody note. How do we know what chords are going to fit? There's always going to be 3 options. I'll just play them in root position to get us started. If the first note was E, there's always using E as the root. There's using E as the third. There's using E as the fifth of the chord. Do you see how in the left hand, E went from the bottom of the chord to the middle of the chord to the top of the chord? Those are three relatively simple choices to make. I'm going to stick with, since I want this to be in C, the first chord is going to be C major. So, next chord, we need to harmonize something with B. Once again, we have three choices. B, technically, diminished would be in the key, in the scale. Let's not use that. G and E. Do you see how the B now is our common tone for those three? So, what if we have, that would be a good start. I'm going to quickly go through the rest, following the same procedure, just playing root position in the left hand and using the melody as a common tone in the chord. How about? Oh, that's not where I went, so there it was. E, G, and then A. That's a great start to writing something of your own. We could take the same melody. Let's expand on that. So just to show you where this can go from this point. We don't have to be locked into all of that stuff, but still using C major and exploring, let's say keeping, not necessarily writing a new change for every melodic pitch, but still with the idea that we're using common tones. Common tones now might be more extended chords or extended harmony, so. Very similar line. If I didn't reharmonize that, the B becomes major 7 of C. What if we use this D minor 7? That works too. Let's use A minor. So same little melody, but harmonized differently. So that takes little theory. We can just use white key chords in root position to get us started and literally pick out random notes to play a melody. If we want more structure than that, we can add, let's say, one little rule at a time. So we can add rules about how we generate a melody. Maybe we want to generate a melody that's only stepwise, only by half step or whole step. Or maybe we limit the number of skips and we say, during our 4 measures, we can only use skips twice, something like that. You can also start by creating a chord change, a set of chord changes first, and then remember those and try to write a melody on top using the same principles, using common tones first to see where you can go. Cool. I cannot remember whose question that was. Z-Spark. I hope that answers your question. Okay. Dith, I missed your question about ornaments. Can you retype that, Dith, for me? Let's see. Oh, Rhodesy, that's very kind. I appreciate that. You said if all teachers were like me, we would have 10 new Mozarts a day. Well, thanks, Rhodesy. Hello, Julio. Welcome. Welcome to the stream. Oh, so Dith. Okay, you said you basically have trouble fitting ornaments into the regular rhythm. Do you have a piece that you're working on, Dith, where this is a particular problem? And hello, Nathaniel. Yeah, so Dith, you said you either have to slow way down or it'll throw off your other hand. What we generally want to do with an ornament is first, oh man, I do not have a copy of the Bach's Little Prelude in C. What we generally want to do is find a way to create a very rhythmic version of the ornament. And we'll do that for a while until ornamentation becomes very comfortable for us. And ornamentation can be mordents or turns or trills. We want to place them on rhythmic markers. So let's go back to our paper here. Let's say we're in C major and we have something like that. So we have an E, we have a trill between F and G. However, that trill would be marked. What we're going to do is create, and you can even write this. I like to write it above the staff, wherever the ornament is marked. So let's say we have an ornament. In this case, it's a trill. That trill is going to be 6 pitches long. And they're all going to be equal. Whoops, let's say 16ths. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There will probably be a little turn at the end. Okay. So any ornament that we have, whether it's a trill or a mordent or anything else, you said it's a G, F sharp turn on a quarter note in the left with an 8th note melody in the right. Let's see, G, F sharp. Just like that. Depending on the marking, and especially in Bach, it might happen on the beat. In which case, I'm still making these very rhythmic. One E and a, 2 E and a, 3 E and a, for example. Instead of trying to play it like that, or let's see, if we land on the final pitch, the 3rd note on the beat, I'm still keeping it rhythmic. These might be 32nd notes or 16th notes, but I would take your sheet and write down an exact literal rhythmic representation of what the ornament is doing. And I would do that for a while, Dith, so that we have a really accurate placeholder of what it is. Internet says start slowly, it takes time. That's true, and it could take days. It could take a lot longer than that. When I was working on, when I was working on Bach when I was a teenager, it was years that my teacher wrote out all of the ornaments and wrote them in very, very rhythmically for me. Before, I was able to execute them more freely and kind of without tempo or without the confines of the beat. Yeah? So if you get used to doing this kind of thing, I think that can serve you for a long, long time. Every time we have a turn, write out exactly how you would like it to be rhythmically. And then we're not guessing. We're not saying like, oh, I have to fit this in somehow. Because when we say I've got to fit it in or I have to add it, and we don't know exactly how, that's when we lose track of the two hands. Yeah. Okay. Let's see. Alexis, you said, how do you go about making exercises from the piece you're learning? That's a great question. Let me give you an example of that. Sure. Okay. Challenge for everybody. Do you know what this piece is? Oh, it says it right on the top of the screen. I didn't even see that. Okay. Well, that was not a very fun game. This is the third page of the Liszt Sonata. So let's just look at, this looks very intense, but let's just look at this. Here's the simplest way to turn something into an exercise. Let's say I need to practice this first part of the bar, right? And especially the left hand is troublesome. First of all you need to do to create an exercise out of this is just play that part of the piece. Typically we'd call that chunking. I'd call it chunking. And work on all the stuff that you'd regularly do in practice. Just do that, right? I picked this because it's actually a wonderful representation of sequencing. As we zoom out, we have similar motion that gets repeated and repeated and repeated a couple different times. So the first bar gets repeated exactly in the second bar, and then varied, sequenced up and step, repeated again, and then now we're in the middle line here, varied again, sequenced up and step. What Liszt has done is basically write out an exercise of approximately a measure, a little bit less, that, and given us a sequence going up. Same. Up. Up. Yes? That is the principle we can use in any other piece of music. He actually wrote it out for you in that piece. But let's say we have something simpler, like oh gosh, I always confuse that Clementi and Mozart. Let's jump over. Oh yeah. To the beginning of that. Opus 36, number 3. We talked about that a week or two weeks ago, right? Can we transpose this? Whoops. There it is. So now we've made something like an exercise out of it. We could transpose it again. C5. And so what we're doing is we're taking the same, the biggest component in this is C major scale. That's the challenging technical component, right? And we're sequencing it up to D, to E. So we're using transposition, sequencing, and playing the same thing and creating an exercise out of it. That's really what scales are, right? Let's see. Internet said this is an example, of why playing Hanon is such a waste. You can be a Hanon master and not be able to do the list at all. That is true. That is true. Yes. So I hope that makes sense. Whose question was this? I cannot remember. Oh, Alexis. There we go, Alexis. So that's one way that we can tackle making exercises out of the repertoire. There are even, there's an endless number of ways that we can do that. Look for the tricky technical bit. What is it? Analyze what it is. Is it a scale? Is it an arpeggio? Is it a movement between the hands? And then basically copy what is in that measure, and we're going to play it in a variety of keys. We're going to play it maybe in a variety of rhythms. We can play it in both hands. This is one that I have not personally used, but is very popular online right now, is the symmetrical inversion. So let's say, it's basically, think about it this way. If we have a scale, which was our scale in the sonatina, symmetrical inversion would be starting with both hands and playing opposite, which just turns into a contrary scale, right? Contrary motion scale. That's the same thing as symmetrical inversion, pretty much. But we can create exercises that use both hands to perform the same passage, but we'll have to perform them in opposite directions usually, because the hands are mirror images of each other. Okay, I went a little bit off track there, but I hope that helps, Alexis. Julio says, is it possible to have a grace note between two notes that are tied, or will the notes be slurred in that case? It's definitely... Julio, do you have an example? Because, if we have grace notes between, then we would not be able to re-articulate the tied pitch, which would imply that it would be a slur and not a tie. So unless there's a second voice, if there's a second voice coming in and we have one pitch, something like that, where the top voice stays tied. It's not even tied across the grace note, though. So I'm thinking no, that's not really likely. Oh, Seth said Chopin mazurka, but then it is a slur. I've been encountering some music where, depending on the quality of your edition, it really makes a difference. There have been, I'm actually just, I'll show everybody because I think I have it on here. I've been teaching a little bit of, I know Mendelssohn has been kind of a theme on here lately. Oh, this is just Opus 19. Here we go. One of my students is working on this, Mendelssohn's Song Without Words from Opus 38, number 4. And I bring this up because here's a great example. There aren't grace notes, but this middle measure, that looks like a tie, doesn't it? And that E, gosh, it looks like a tie. Right? But In the Henley edition, it's very obvious that it's not, because the slur goes from the A to the E. It's not from the two like pitches. And so we know that this is not a tie. It's actually a slur. And it completely has to do with the engraving that was done. When we put this tie, or what looks like a tie, on the note head side connecting two of the same pitches, it really obscures that this is supposed to be right? We have a little bit of an example of why it actually works that way, because here there is no tie, there's no slur, and the melody does descend by fourth. Interesting. Yeah. Okay. Just thought that would be a fun little place to look, because it makes a huge difference. Okay. I think I caught up on all the questions. Oh my goodness. Hello, Sir Wolseley. And hello, Nathaniel. I think I mentioned. I think I said hello. So, Z Spark, you're talking about the score I just showed, right? What about the notes that are slur plus staccato? Those are, think about it exactly like what it looks like. Can we connect? Can we create a sense of connection while also showing detachment between notes? Yes? Does anybody know the name of that articulation? Anybody? Dith says complicated. Let me put it back on the screen. We'd be talking about all of these where there's a slur plus staccato. Alexis, I'll come back to that quickly, Alexis. Anybody know what those are called? Oh, Zen of Zen. And 3R7S. Wonderful. And I'm very glad that autocorrect didn't type potato, because every time I try to type or text portato, it autocorrects to potato. Yes, those are called portato. Wonderful. So portato is a type of articulation that I think about it almost like a little bit of pressing, and a lot of times it'll be pedaled. To me, it implies that we will probably not fully connect with pedal all of these. Whoops. But that there will be not even a breath, but they're ever so slightly disconnected. You'll see portato used in Mozart, especially. There'll be phrases where he wants to give a different impression than just staccato or just fully legato. And we have, I wish I could find something quickly. Maybe I can. Let's see. No, I'm not finding anything super quickly. But definitely in Mozart, you'll see portato used quite a bit. So that's what those staccato marks with the slur, that's what those mean. We're kind of, think about it like taking the best of both worlds, slight detachment, but also still with a sense, an underlying sense of connection. And Seth, you said, I remember your legato scales being described as portato. That If you weren't going for that, then oops. But usually people have a hard time creating a good portato sound. That's not the simplest thing to create. So, let's see. Let's see. Nelba, I see your question. Nelba and Alexis. Let me see if I have. Let's see. You said Chopin Prelude. So opus 28. And we were looking at number 24. Page 55. Okay. I have not played this piece. So let's see. Alexis, you're asking tips for the runs. Yeah. Let's see here. So the first one, for example, this is the right piece, right? Yes. Okay. The first one that we see in measure 14, Alexis, is almost very simply a scale. So that should be fairly simple to execute. Maybe not at the speed, but at least we know, other than the turn that begins it, it's F major. And we can group that in any way that you would group F major to work on increasing speed. So we might, we're going to chunk it. So let me get rid of all those markings. We'll create a chunk of the first pitches to here, and then probably start again. So that's our first group, and then cross the thumb to the, and then so taking every change of thumb, or every thumb tuck, and practicing across as fast as you possibly can, as cleanly as you possibly can. You can do that all the way up. Better than that. To the top. And then, can we maybe leave the first one and then play an entire octave? So all we've done is group, if I do it in a different color, that first one and the second one together. We've eliminated one chunk, right? But the idea is that every time we play, we make sure we eliminate tension. So we start with the smaller chunks. We get used to those, and then we gradually add the chunks together, but still, I'm still releasing, right? And then, next octave. Make sense? That's how I would tackle all of these. Even going down the page, they become... let's see. Oh, that's... There we go. They're still scales. So how can we group them together so we get some really good scale practice in? The last little bit would be starting to think about the alignment between the two hands. And in that case, I would go back to the first thing internet privacy said, which is take it slowly. So work on speed with one hand. Take it slowly when you start to put both hands together. When it's ready to move on and become really well formed and well formulated, we're going to keep time here with the left hand, and the right hand is just going to be let loose. So the scale has to be executed so well that it goes on what I call autopilot, while we make one or two pitches of that scale line up with an important note in the left hand. Yeah. Alexis, I hope that helps. Road C, no, I was in recording sessions Monday and Tuesday, so I have not been on email, actually. Nelba said, any tricks for double thirds? Yeah, Nelba, the way that I love to practice them, I can't not remember which piece you're learning right now and looking at. But I love to practice double thirds with great attack from the wrist. So let's just take C major. Just play them staccato. Don't try to make them legato until they're really, really crisp, well articulated, and probably up to speed. So every one of these, you can see the wrist doing a job. Yes? That's how I would go about both hands. Whatever you need to do, if you need to do them in both hands, play from the wrist down with a good bounce in the wrist. So there's always preparation, but very far away from trying to do this with finger legato, because that creates a lot of tension, right? We want to add the legato tone back once we can really cleanly articulate this. And then we'll find out just how much we need to add when it's at final tempo. But if we try to play with finger legato, it's always going to be slow and it's always going to be tense. And we're going to have a lot of trouble speeding it up. And we'll probably also cause trouble with the fingers breaking or the thirds breaking between the hands. So Nelba, give that a try. Okay, great. Sir Wolseley, you said you're polishing the last parts of Chopin's Opus 27, number 1. Woohoo! One of my favorite pieces. And you're currently at 80. That's great that you're logging your time, Sir Wolseley. 83 hours of practice on it over, what is that, 3 to 4 months so far? Yeah, absolutely. Love that you're logging time. Cool. Did I hit all the questions? Oh, Alan. I see Alan. You have a question. What's the difference between tenuto and portato? Tenuto is... I think tenuto has more intensity. Tenuto could also possibly mean taking a little bit of time. Because tenuto comes from Latin tenere, which is to hold on to. So tenuto notes are almost like caressed notes. They are accented, but they're not punchy, right? They're closer, I would say closest to emphasis marks in Chopin. So we have a variety of things we can do to show that emphasis, to show tenuto, to show how we hold on to and bring that note out. But different than portato in that tenuto does not necessarily mean a release like portato would. And tenuto does not necessarily have anything to do with how we would choose to pedal either. Yeah. Okay. Alexis, I do not have that music handy. Fast octave passage. Let's see. Consistent accuracy. Consistent accuracy in fast octaves, Alexis. I would use a practice technique where we pause on the notes that we consistently miss. So let's go back to the Liszt Sonata. I'm going to regret this. I'm not going to go to the wonderful passage at the end of the piece because I haven't played it in over 10 years. So we'll take a little bit of the octaves from the first page, which still present some of their own challenge. So starting from toward the end of the first line, you can see So there are some faster moving octaves in there. What we would want to do is, let's say, this is the first triplet here. I want to find out where exactly are the notes that I consistently miss and why. Why do I consistently miss them? So I tend to not get right that one. Yeah. So now what I want to do is add an emphasis to that note that I just circled. And that emphasis is going to be a little bit of dynamic, and it's going to be a lot of time. And then go on. So, a little more context. So I know I'm slowing down, but I'm making sure that the problem I was having when I was just playing it was that I was overshooting the leap in the left hand, and I was going too far down. So I identified what the problem was, and that we need to stop here. And now each iteration through practice, I'm making sure my left hand travels a somewhat, just tiny bit shorter distance, because I was only overshooting by half a key. Right? Then we could move on. What about the next one? Is it different? That's a lot easier. This one might be the biggest problem causer because I might tend to hit the F sharp with a finger that I don't want to use. Or not F sharp, but maybe let's see, what was it? The C sharp? C sharp or D sharp, one of those two might get accidentally splatted as I play through there. So I would do the same thing. Pause on that note. Make sure I can keep going. Now try it in context. Pretty good. Welcome to the joys of practicing. I went back to the first bar, and this was great, the left hand, and I missed stuff in the right. So then I would shift gears, and I'd say, why did I miss what I missed in the right? And how can I go about fixing it? Most likely, again, with a pause and with a slight accent. So, Alexis, that is how I'd usually tackle an octave passage where consistency is a problem, or making sure if we have if we have leaps that we're hitting the right pitches, and we're not splatting anything, we're not missing something by a minor second or a major second, something like that. Alexis, are you talking about the Liszt Sonata with your latest comment there?
Sorry, I'm having trouble understanding.
Yeah, my pleasure, Alexis. Let's see. So Julio, I think we're going back to your question. You said you reread and realized that the downbeat of the grace note is beamed to another note with the same pitch, which is also A. I'm assuming it's a slur since the second note of the grace note is B flat. The downbeat of the grace note is beamed to another note with the same pitch. Grace notes, here's another thing that might be confusing, Julio. Grace notes should almost always have a slur marking that connects. The slur marking should not, in a good addition, connect the grace notes to the main pitch. It should be between the grace notes only. In which case, that is definitely not a tie. And that might be another point of confusion in that bar. But almost always, some classical editions don't show that, but in modern notation, you almost always have a slur across the grace note passage. Let's see. Nancy, you said, beginner question. Some staccato marks are dots, some are triangles. Are the triangles played differently? And you've only found answers for string players online. That really depends on the addition. So triangles typically are staccatissimo, which is shorter than staccato. And sometimes they look like triangles. Sometimes triangles can also be a different thing. They can be martellato as well. So staccatissimo looks like a triangle, but it's almost more of like a teardrop shape. And again, it'll depend on addition. But if you have those, they're more elongated than staccato. It's like a staccato with a kind of a point on it. Yeah? The ones in this piece that you were seeing, Nancy, those are martellato, which is a very metallic, hammer-like accent. Probably also a short articulation like a staccato. But it also shows accent and intention. So I would wonder about the music you're playing, Nancy. I would not think that any beginner music would have martellato marks. That would be strange. So I would be inclined to think that they're staccatissimo or very, very short staccatos. Let's see, your Bergmuller number 2. Let's take a look. I don't believe my copy has anything other than... I only have staccatos marked on Bergmuller number 2 from Opus 100. Schirmer, yes. That is probably just a short staccato. Okay. Yeah, Nancy, that's... yeah. I would look up, see if you can Google, Nancy, the difference between staccatissimo and martellato and see what those are and see what looks closer. The Bergmuller is definitely not accented. It would just be a short staccato, if anything. Yeah. Okay, cool. Bread Stack. Hello, Bread Stack. Tips for Chopin's Opus 64 number 2. Okay. Let me see what we can do, Bread Stack. I don't have that music on my iPad, so I won't be able to show everybody, but I can look it up if I grab it off my bookshelf. We might only take 1 or 2 more questions after this one. Let's see. 64. Number 2. So you said you need to finish the piece in 2 weeks. And you're barely an intermediate pianist. We are looking at the right one, yes? No, this is Opus. Oh, I don't think that's the right one. 64, number 2. Oh, I went to page 64. Ha! Okay, this is going to be better. I was gonna say that's a deep track, a deep cut from Chopin. This one is not much more commonly played. Okay. So. Let's see. Breadstack, do you have any particular questions that you're looking for help on? It's hard to know exactly where to direct you. Let me know if you have anything very specific. Also, why do you need to finish the piece in 2 weeks? Okay. Grease said grace notes, maybe some finger choices. Finger choices is a tough one because it's going to be, you have a piano recital, okay. If you've already been learning it for a while, I would not necessarily change finger choices at this point, not with only 2 weeks to go. Yeah, I wouldn't change anything. I would consistently practice what you've already been working on. Changing something this close to a performance would not be a great plan unless there might be a couple reasons, but we don't have to get into that. Okay, the grace notes. I wish I could show this to everybody, but when we're playing those grace notes, try to rotate a little bit between the grace and the third. For example, this is in the third measure. So, where we're feeling this motion, it's made smaller when we play the third following, but it's the same kind of motion, where we're feeling the hand rotate toward the thumb. And be sure, if you're not already, that you're not playing the outer notes together like this, and then going to the A, but it's grace note first. Yes? Okay. Let's look at the next one. Same thing. Yeah. On the second line, the second iteration of those, you can feel more rotation of the wrist. So we're not asking, the fingers to do all that. So there you go, that motion. Apologies because I'm just sight reading it, but the fingers that I have in my edition breadstack are good for all of these repeated notes. They're good suggestions, and I have 3 2 3 2 3. That's great. Yeah. This is a very difficult piece, breadstack, for an early intermediate pianist. Rotsi. So breadstack, again, we're probably reading similar finger choices in the editions that we're working off of. In the Pumoso that follows, starting each of these with 4. Yeah. Is good. So I don't know if I have any other comments for you, breadstack. Other than follow the fingers that are in the score. If you're having trouble speeding these up, just don't speed them up. This can still have just a little bit more movement. It doesn't have to fly. It doesn't have to be. Not right now. Just play it nice, play it musically. Oh, here's one more tip for you. Through all of these moving passages, don't try to play them all stretched out with fingers only. That's going to not help us, but let the wrist and the arm be free. Yes? Okay. breadstack, I wish I could help more, but I think that's what I have for you today. We wish you the best of luck with your performance, for sure. If you would like to send in a video of it, we'd still love to hear you play it. Yes. Yes, breadstack. You got it perfectly. You said like a circular motion. Spot on. Yes. Great. I'd be curious, breadstack, what else you are playing. What else have you been working on, and how long have you been practicing this waltz? And Sir Wolseley, a great comment there. Micro practice, isolating the bar, play it continuously, but with mind. That's a great summary, Sir Wolseley, of that concept. No autopilot. Yeah. Wonderful. Yeah, internet. I do believe I remember Yuja's recording of that waltz. It's very nice. It's very nice. Oh, Sir Wolseley, I missed your last question. So your teacher wants you to tackle the first movement of K311. It's another one I need to pull my scores off my bookshelf for, because I don't think I have it on here. 311. I do not. But the big book of Mozart sonatas. So, Wolseley, this is going to be quite a challenge for you. Is it too much? That's up to you. But Sir Wolseley, you have not done a lot of really fast-moving stuff, as far as I know, until this last Chopin nocturne. That might really make a difference in what I would say to you. Your teacher has heard you play it. I have not. But this would be your first Mozart sonata, yes? Sir Wolseley? What other classical sonata form have you played? This, you said, yeah. And yes, see, Rhodesy. Yes, Rhodesy, I'm 6'1". Oh, Sir Wolseley, I don't know if I would choose this as your first dive into classical sonata form repertoire. Yeah. Honestly, I might choose a Beethoven sonata first. It was one, actually, what I might choose for you is one that we heard a couple weeks ago. I'm not sure if you were in the stream or not, Sir Wolseley, but I'll tell you about it. Let's see. 236. Here we go. Sir Wolseley, I don't remember how long ago it was, but this Opus 49, number 2 by Beethoven, this will be much more accessible for your first time. It's still allegro. It's still got plenty of movement, and you can work on building speed, but it's... There are two movements. The first movement is very similar to what you just heard for, I think it's 3 or 4 pages long. The second movement is nice and slow. It's a pretty movement. But I would recommend something like that, or even a Beethoven sonatina, or even a Clementi sonatina. Maybe not the first one in Opus 36, but the 3, 4, 5, or 6. I would do one of those first before really major Mozart work. Bethany, I did not catch your question. Oh, I did catch your question and I forgot to respond. Let me just finish up with Sir Wolseley and then I'll answer your question and we'll call it a day after that. Yeah, Sir Wolseley, you said you also think it's a bit much, but your teacher wants to run before walking. Sounds, I I'd wonder why they really want you to work on that piece. Is it because you're going to be more interested in it because of I know, Sir Wolseley, you like playing some of the major repertoire and that you find that interesting. And, if you're going to go to a recital, you're not necessarily going to hear Beethoven Opus 49 because I think technically he wrote both Opus 49, number 1 and number 2, for students of his. They weren't published for years, 1 or 2 decades after he wrote them. So if you really are interested and you're going to practice more because it's a famous work, a really famous work, that could be a reason your teacher wants you to do that. Personally, I would always advocate toward a piece that's a little simpler, that you have a chance at getting up to performance tempo, rather than something that's really, really difficult. All of Mozart is really, really difficult. It's all very hard. But that would even so that would not be the first Mozart I'd even start with. I'd start you with the typical. I think that's what, 5/4/5. We would do that first. Okay. Let me jump over to Bethany's question, and then we're going to call it a day. Let's see. Bethany, you said, how do you decide without a teacher if a piece is appropriately challenging, too easy, or too hard, etc.? That's a great question, Bethany. The first place I'd consult are some of the resources, that leveling resources, like either RCM or Henley, especially Henley, Bethany, because your playing is pretty advanced, and Henley's going to have a better separation of levels for you. I would steer you away unless you really want to have a passion project and work on it for a long time. I wouldn't play anything that's Henley level 9. Level 8 would be a very difficult challenge for you. Level 7 would be a challenge but doable. So you can look up repertoire that are in those levels. Those are all going to be beyond like RCM diploma level stuff. Beyond that, you know your technique better than anyone else if you don't have a teacher. And so you know what are your strong points. Are they scales, arpeggios, octaves? Is it clean Alberti bass? Is it repetitions between hands? What do you know you're already really good at? And what do you know you aren't? Because a general level or sense of difficulty is going to be highly dependent on your technical development of different aspects, different things, right? So, someone who can play Bach preludes and fugues really well, they might be wonderful at that, and those are challenging in their own way, and they might not have a chance at playing like the Chopin second or third sonata, because other aspects of technique maybe haven't been developed so well. So I would look at the sheet music for that repertoire, because like here, a great example is Liszt. We were looking at the Liszt sonata earlier today, but there's a lot of Liszt repertoire, like Un Sospiro, that I just played 2 measures of at the beginning of the session. A lot of it sounds much more challenging than it actually is. And a lot of it is much more challenging than it sounds. And so it's difficult, relating to Internet's comment, who said, listen to recordings. There are a lot of times you cannot tell how difficult something is by what it sounds like. Same thing, that's the reason why Mozart is so difficult. It doesn't sound difficult on recordings, not compared to what else we're used to listening to. But it's incredibly challenging when we dive into what exactly we need to articulate. So I know that's not like a very clear answer to your question, Bethany, but I would compare and contrast the technical needs in a particular piece with what you've already experienced in other rep and how hard you know that was for you. So let me give you another example in my case. Anything that has octaves in it, I'm generally a faster learner and better performer of than intricate, moving, little notey type music like Mozart. If it's got octaves, I can learn it well, I can execute it pretty well, and it's going to be great. Internet, that's also why I write a lot of stuff in octaves myself. I know Internet Privacy likes to play a lot of my arrangements. I write a lot of octaves because they're relatively easy for me. They're not easy for everybody else. Some people probably yes. But that's easy for me. I don't write a lot of scalar passages or linear passages weaving up and around and all over the place because I would have to practice it more to get it really good. So that's how I write music, but it also relates to when I look at a piece and I say, this is going to take me X amount of time to learn. Learning, for example, Chopin Opus 10 number 2 is going to take a lot longer for me to learn because I don't like that movement by half step and by step. My hands aren't naturally as good at it. Even with all the practice and years of study, that's going to take me longer to learn, and it's going to be a bigger challenge than Opus 10 number 1 or the very, very last one. Is it Opus 25 number 12? Those arpeggios, great. They feel more like octaves to me. I don't have to make my big hands get into such a small space. So they're just a lot easier, even though they're etudes and even though they're studies, and they're all hard in their own way, right? Okay, so Bethany, I hope that helps. Take a look at those intricacies, and that can be your judge without a teacher. And also then compare that to the Henley levels, I'd say. Rhodesy, I will check out your album, and we'll see about putting it on the next stream, or at least one selection of it or something. Sir Wolseley, I'll finish up by answering your question, then we're going to call it a day. Yes, Sir Wolseley, I was recording, let's see, on Monday, I was recording 2 new original pieces. I have a bunch of stuff that's coming out, and that's part of the reason why I haven't put a new video out here on Pianist Academy in a month. There's been a lot of other projects I've been working on. So I was recording 2 new originals for a new EP project that's probably going to be released in a few months. I have a couple more to write, but 2/3 or 3/4 of that project is done and recorded now. So I did 2 of those on Monday. Yesterday, a flute player was over, actually here in the space here, and we recorded 2 new original pieces, completely improv'd on the spot, and those are probably going to be released later this year. Not classical in nature at all, but fun stuff. And then I know some of you keep up with my other things. I have my EP, it's actually an album, it's long enough. My album of transcriptions is officially coming out in about a month and 5 days. So, I've been busy with all that stuff. Yes. Thanks, Internet. I appreciate it. How, I'll answer your question very quickly. You said you're 35 and starting to learn the piano. Would it be too late to become a pianist in 10 years? I'll second what Alexis just said. It's never too late. It's never too late. Use your time well. Use your practice time well. Practice efficiently. And you can make a whole lot of progress in just a few years. Absolutely. I mean, look at Sir Wolseley started playing like 2 years ago, and he's already playing big Chopin nocturnes. And Sir Wolseley said, concert pianist, 99% yes. Yeah. Yeah, you know, there's a lot that you can learn in 10 years, and 10 years is a lot of time. But most important is that you practice well, which leads us to the end of our show today. We always say practice smarter, not harder, and that is the best answer to give how. Practice smartly, Don't just put the time in, but make sure that every minute that you're working on something is intentional and that you have a good reason to be working on what you're working on. Yes. Okay, everybody, thanks so much for being here. We had a great session. The 2 hours and 15 minutes flew by. Thanks, Nancy. Please hit the thumbs up if you haven't already. Please hit the thumbs up button. All right. We'll see you back here in 2 weeks. We have another show in 2 weeks. And if anybody wants to send in a video submission, that is open. It's open. And there are instructions down below in the description. All right. I'll see you in 2 weeks. Practice smarter, not harder. And have a great rest of your week, everybody.